Here in the US, there's a culture of more of showing what you're doing, and that's like one big cultural shift that I had to do, and understanding on how to promote myself and like trying to show the work that I've done, the progress that I've done in the last year, last month, last week. So I'm Mariano. I'm a software engineer. I'm originally from Argentina. I studied in the Universidad de Buenos Aires, and right now I'm living in Denver, Colorado. I've been here for 2 years now. Before that, I was 5 years in San Francisco and 1 year in New York. I think it's pretty different here in Denver than it was in San Francisco. San Francisco is mostly a tech city at this point. Everyone else was like pushed away from the city because it's so expensive. So only people that work in tech really can afford to live there. So there, it's way more involved. Like everything revolves around tech, and like most people that we are going to know outside of your job, they are probably working in tech somewhere else anyways. Here in Denver, I feel like it's way more diverse in that sense. It's maybe less diverse in terms of race and ethnicity, and more diverse in terms of what people are doing. So they are very, very different, San Francisco from Denver. Here in Colorado, like everything is about the outdoors. It's snowing outside today, and people like go up to the mountains in winter to ski, in summer to hike or to climb. So that there's a lot of that, which was one of the reasons why I moved here. I really like the outdoors, and Colorado is like unparalleled in that. Like I can approach this from the differences of working here versus working in Argentina, where I was previously. I think there are two main things. One is not related to any industry in particular, but just like the differences in like economic stability, that you know that next month things are going to be relatively similar to this month, which is a nice thing, and one of the reasons why a lot of people end up leaving Latin America in general. And the other one is related to the job itself. Is I see a big difference culturally in how people work here in the US versus in Argentina in particular, which is in Argentina, you do your job, and at the end of the day, you're done and you're happy, and that's pretty much it. And like your boss sees what you're doing, and that's it. Here in the US, there's a culture of more of showing what you're doing, and that's like one big cultural shift that I had to do, and understanding on how to promote myself and like trying to show the work that I've done, the progress that I've done in the last year, last month, last week, like always showing and not only doing. And that was one of the hardest things for me when I moved here and started working in companies from the US. I worked in different companies in terms of size as well. So I was in companies where I was the only engineer or the only of two engineers. Now I work for a company that has like 2,000 engineers. I was in teams of like 150 engineers. So there's a lot of variation between those. Obviously, the smaller the company it is, the more things you're doing in terms of like different things. You are doing like from customer support to database administration to like front end, back end, you're doing pretty much everything. As you go bigger in terms of the company, you're probably going to be a little bit more specialized. Startups in general still have that ethos of like everyone has to know at least something about everything, and it's like you're still doing things that are outside of your immediate surroundings, but yeah, as you grow, you do less and less of that, and you're responsible for less of that. I think that there are a couple of different things that the software engineer does in day to day. And I think this is true for both corporations and startups, but especially for startups. So apart from designing and coming up with how to implement something given the requirements, or sometimes even coming up with the requirements and then implementing, testing, sending to production, monitoring, doing A/B testing, and all of that. That is kind of what one could expect from being a software engineer. There are other things like interviewing. Startups are constantly hiring most of the time, and like you are an active part of that process, and that can be from coming up with the questions that are going to be asked in interviews to conducting the interviews, doing debriefs of those, and that's the lifeline of a startup is new people coming in, because the idea is that the business is growing and the needs of the company are growing, so you're getting new people all the time. Related to that is onboarding new engineers. So a new person might join your team and someone needs to help them ease into the way that the team is working and how the company does things. So that, again, can be from doing it day to day, like sitting next to, or now virtually, but next to someone new and helping them navigate through their first weeks or months, or can be actually helping in the process of how to do that in terms of documentation or tooling. That really depends on what's your personal style. I really love processes in general, so I was involved many times in defining how we are onboarding a new person, how we help them. Sometimes we teach classes about particular things and coming up with those. And sometimes it's, again, like sitting next to someone and being their buddy for the first couple of weeks, helping them choose a project that would be good for them, navigating like code reviews with them and all of that. I think I would ask many questions, and one of the things that I do in these one-on-one conversations that I have with people is like trying to understand where they are coming from and understanding why they are doing what they're doing. And I think that helps then lead the way, or like show them the different paths that they can take. So the first one is like, why are you trying to get into tech? Money tends to be one of the answers. And that's okay. Like we all work at the end of the day because we need money to like buy things and eat and do what we like. But if that's the only reason why you're getting into tech, you're going to not be happy. So like I would advise against that. But once we get through that and say, okay, like I really like technology. I think that building things for other people to use is interesting and it's important or whatever. The next one would be, don't worry too much where you're coming from in terms of like where you studied. Some people study in universities, some people do boot camps, some people just learn by themselves, just by doing. And I've seen successful people in like from all those backgrounds, and I've seen unsuccessful people from all those backgrounds. So the fact that you finish your CS degree doesn't mean that you're going to be good at software or that you are actually going to get a good job. So don't stress too much about that. That would be one of the things. The other one, and this is my personal opinion, and I know that other people think differently and have had successful careers in a different way. But for me, especially for someone that is just beginning, is to try to go broad instead of deep, and get a sense of everything that is under the sun when we talk about software development. So sometimes like touching something on the front end, touching some back end, understanding something about databases. If you're interested in AI, go into that. If you're interested in machine learning, learn a little bit of that. And not necessarily try to get too deep into one of those things until you get a sense of everything that there is. The reason why I say that is because the amount of like different topics that you can touch when you're working in technology is so big that if you get into a niche from the beginning, you're going to miss out in a lot of things that could be interesting to you. The other thing is that everything changes so fast. Like 5 years ago, almost no one was talking about NFTs or like crypto or whatever. And now they are like the super hot thing. And I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years or in 2 even. So it's better to form a broad base that then you can build whatever on top of that, instead of trying to go too deep into something and then being left out because you don't understand more concepts. And this also helps you a lot because if you know a little bit of everything, you have a place in smaller companies where they only have like 5 engineers, so they need everyone to know about everything. If you get too specialized, kind of the only place that you are going to be able to work at big companies that have the room for people that are specialists. And that's good. And like at some point in your career, you might want to get into that. But at the beginning, I think it's nice to kind of jump around and get different experiences in different sizes of companies. And so going broad instead of deep kind of helps you with that. So one of the things that I see a lot of people asking, especially when they are just starting in tech, is like trying to figure out what the right technology to learn is. Like which languages should I be learning? And I think that's similar to what I said before. It's like it doesn't really matter. At the beginning, you want to build a like broader base. So like almost any language that you hear about day to day when you start looking into tech is going to make sense for you to learn at some point. And like obviously Java, Ruby, Python, even PHP, which gets a lot of bad rep, but it's still like very much used, and I think it gives you a good understanding of a lot of things that other languages don't. And then if you're in the front end, obviously JavaScript with all its various like React and Angular and everything that all the frameworks that are on top of that, it doesn't really matter. It's like learn something. Like if you want to get into tech to build a website, well, go and learn the technologies that let you build a website and have fun with that and try to understand it. And then everything else will come. Why you want to live here? There are so many places. It's like, why the US? And I'm here, so I answered that question for me at some point. But like I think you need to answer that first. Then the second one is like the US. We talk about that as a country, but it's actually like very diverse in terms of how it looks like. The culture in different places is different. It's very different working or living in a big city versus small town. So getting a sense of that, like what your aspirations are, is really important. And then, then comes the process of actually getting a visa to work here. And there are many different ways of getting one. Two of the most common, I would say, is the H1, which you get when a company offers you a job. Like you're abroad and you get a job offer from a company here in the US, and like you get that visa in particular. That goes through a lottery, so it's not only that you have to do all the paperwork, but you also have to get lucky and get it. And the other one is the L1, which is basically you work for a company that has offices both in the US and in your country of origin, and you are already working for them and they do an internal transfer. And that one is relatively easier, just because you don't go through a lottery. But there are less companies that offer that, obviously. So what I would say is, after you answer why you want to work here, and after you actually get like an idea of in which type of company you want to work on, then the other one is like good luck, because you have to actually get it, and like take it easy. And like there are companies that are actually moving people to Canada first, and they start working there because it's easier to get the visa. And then once the one for the US comes along, they can move to the US. So like there are different ways. You have to be patient. You have to get a little bit lucky, but it's totally doable. And like I know people that came here and then didn't like it and ended up moving back to either Argentina or their country of origin. And it's like it's not the end of the world. So actually, most of the people are mid-career. They've already spent like between 2 and 5 years in tech, and sometimes even more. And they don't see how to get to the next level, like what's the next step that I can take. And something that I always tell them is, when you start your career and you're like a junior engineer, mostly what happens is someone comes to you and tells you, hey, this is the problem, this is the solution, go and implement it. So that's the first years of your career. Most of the time you're spending it that way. Then when you're starting to get like more semi-senior, senior level, someone comes and tells you, hey, we have this problem. And then what you do is say, okay, this could be the solution, and you go and implement it. And that's the second step. And the third step is no one tells you anything, and you have to figure out what are the problems that your company or your team, or like in whatever context you are, should be solving. And you are the one going out and say, hey, this is a problem that I'm seeing that we should solve. And then depending on how your team looks like, you could say, and this is a possible solution, go and implement it. So you're talking to a junior now and telling them what to do. Or you're just talking to a semi-senior, senior engineer and say, hey, this is a problem, figure out the solution and implement it. And like that's, for me, the three steps. Or there are many more levels in general in companies, but like if you divide it in three big chunks, I'd say those are the three one. And most people get stuck in the second one, and it's really hard for them to go to the next level. So I think if someone is in that situation now, I think that's where they should start looking at.
Cool. Anything you can tell them, to those people that are in the second stage, that they're stuck, in order to get some tools, or what tools they can use to understand, okay, how I'm going to find the solution?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that is really helpful is looking, when someone comes to them telling them, hey, this is a problem, find a solution and implement it. Like talking to that person, say, hey, like, how did you figure out that this is a problem? And like that's one, just talking to people that are more experienced than you and try to figure that out. The other one is, when someone comes to you with a problem, go and design a solution and implement it, which is your job. But you can also start looking at, are there any adjacent problems to this one that no one told me about? Like, I'm solving for this particular thing, but is there anything in the vicinity that should also be fixed? And try to come up with ideas. And sometimes you can do this with a friend, like just brainstorm. Hey, I have this problem at work. Like, what other things are similar to this that you've seen in the past that could be related? And just doing that exercise, I think it's really helpful. But yeah, in general, talking to someone more experienced is one of the best ways, because you get like insights on how they think and how they came up with particular problems to give you.
I think to summarize this is, and you have said this a few times when we were talking, is asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For many things, for everything. Where do you want to live? Why? This is a problem we need to solve. Why?
Right. Yeah. There's a tool that is called the 5 whys that I use all the time and talk to everyone that wants to listen about it. But basically, like, whenever there's a question, like, ask why. And usually until you don't get to the 5th time that you're asking why, you're not understanding the actual root problem. So yeah, it's like why and how. And another trick is, you mentioned asking the right questions. Asking the right questions is really hard, but one way to get there is asking all the questions, even if they are not good. Like, come up with a lot of questions, and then you'll find some of them that are good, and you're going to start like getting better at it. But if you don't ask any questions, you'll never get to ask the good ones.